G'day Internet, my name is Alexandira Hayes and welcome to the triumphant return of the Case 4 series, a series that looked dead and buried for a little while, but it's back. And I come to you today wanting to talk about darts. This is a sport that I have followed very passionately since a certain then 16-year-old burst onto the scene at the World Darts Championship. And today I thought it would be a good idea, as the Premier League is winding down, to potentially look at what we can do to improve the sport. When I start following something with great interest, I think I really know that I'm excited by it when I come up with some ideas, and this is what the Case 4 series is all about. Some of the earlier videos, which you can check out, they're still on the channel. I'm not particularly a big fan of those, so hopefully this, I'm going to try and do some different things with the upcoming The Case 4 series going forward in the next few videos. But today I'm going to talk about innovations to darts, and I should mention the 9 Dart podcast, which I co-host with my good friend Josh over at Extra Time. Extra Time is doing some great things at the moment. The channel's really growing, so I would really encourage you to head over there and like and subscribe those videos, and subscribe to the channel if you still haven't watched our massive interview with the Melbourne Aces owner and coach over the decision of the Aces to leave the Australian Baseball League. Simone did a great interview there. Please do check it out. It should be noted that at least at the moment it is not the most popular thing an Extra Time person has done on YouTube. Nevertheless, we shall move on and discuss my ideas for innovations to darts. And I want to start looking at the monetary side of things. Of course, it has been the big debate in darts in recent times with regards to money for Pro Tour first round losers. Now, there would have been a time back in the day, in the earlier versions of the PDC, certainly before Barry Hearn, even when Barry Hearn was at the helm, that the PDC was not really in a financial position to give away first round prize money. I do not think this is the case anymore. The PDC is now getting a massive broadcast deal from Sky Sports alone. I think now is the time to potentially be looking at this. If it's not money for losing in the first round of the Pro Tour, the last 1 to 8 of those Players' Championship events, a much fairer system would to give prize money to those in the first and potentially even second year of their tour cards. Think of these as prize money for winning Q School, if you will. Because what we're seeing at the moment is, despite this supposedly being 128 professionals, this is certainly not the case. About half, maybe 2/3 to be fair, are genuinely professional, but many of these players are still going to work during the week, and given that the Pro Tours are now moving to midweek working days, Mondays, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, this is definitely becoming more of a problem. So I'm a big believer in either first round prize money for Pro Tour losers. You'd get a lot less withdrawals from the Pro Tour side of things, but at the very least, and this is probably what I'm slightly leaning towards, darts has seemingly always been about where you're going to win to earn some prize money. You can still keep that sort of persona around the game, but I do think now is abundantly the time, with the PDC a much bigger organisation than it currently is, to look at doing some money for those who just recently get a tour card. Something else that really needs to be sorting out is the calendar. Now, the calendar is interesting because at this particular point, it is very, very busy. And part of the reason why I think we forget this when we talk about this in all sports generally is because, well, there's a lot of interest. A lot of countries, a lot of places, a lot of venues want darts on their fixture. So I think the calendar is something that does need to be looked at. I do think there needs to be a longer break. I wouldn't hold any World Series events in January. Between the World Championships and the World Masters, I don't have Q School running at that particular time. At least give darts players at least a good 2-3 weeks off in between the World Championships over that sort of early New Year period, early to mid-January period. I think obviously you need to fit Q School at some point. That's the best time to do it, obviously. But at this particular stage, having Q School on at that time, it would still give us something to watch. There'd still be presumably Modus and WDF events on as well, but it would give the PDC stars a nice little break. Ideally, you want one in the middle of the year as well, thanks to the sort of August right after the World Match Play, but with the way the World Series is configured, that's probably unlikely. And people like me in Australia certainly want our share of some live darts as well. Something else that also needs to be mentioned, just going back to the monetary side of things, is the distribution. We know the PDC have now fully updated what their prize money will be going forward, and it's a bit too World Championship heavy. Now, yes, the World Championship is the most important event. It should have the most money. It is well due now for the champion of the world to receive £1 million. It puts it much more in line with other big sporting events. But this is slightly too top-heavy. I would like to see the World Match Play up to a couple million, which gets it to sort of the same sort of distribution as it was previously. So when the World Championship was 2.5 million, the World Match Play 800,000. So now with a 5 million versus 2 million, that sort of works out similar proportionally. Maybe the Premier League up to 1.5 million. The World Grand Prix, the World Grand Prix and the Grand Slam up to about 1 million each. That's where I'd like to see things put just a little bit of boost. I reckon the World Masters there is a bit unders as well with how brilliant that first event was. So now that we've gone through some of that more monetary side of things, I think we should be looking at darts of how we can really improve the product going forward. And something that is very interesting to me is different formats. Basically, every darts tournament is the same. Single in, double out, 501. The only real variations we get is the World Grand Prix which is double start, and the World Cup of Darts, which is a pairs event. But I think there are very interesting formats that we should experiment with. For example, Master Out. So this is where not only can you finish on a double, you can also finish on a treble. Very simple game. But this would create very interesting dynamics, debates online about what is the best way to go in certain checkouts, and it would make a lot of what are now bogey numbers actually finishable. 159, for example. Treble 20, treble 20, treble 13 is how you could finish there. You could finish on a 180, you could finish on a 177. Now, instead of wanting to leave at least a shot at the bull at the end, you'd want to leave a shot at something like a treble 16 or a treble 20, treble 18, depending on what exactly your personal choice is of double. So if that would create variations, I'd love to see this broadcast on television, because I do feel a little bit sorry for the camera operators and spotters. This would be a hard time, because in theory with 24 left you go straight to double 12, but he could go treble 8, you never know. So this would be a bit of a wild event, but I think it would be fun, and it would give just a little bit more variation in the calendar. Something else I would also like to see, 1001, whether this is a one leg shootout or a couple events. 1001 basically the same as 501, but we're starting at 1001 points, of course. We did see this once in PDC at the Jockey Wilson Cup at the pairs match there. Had legs starting of 1001. That's the only time it's been used. Additionally, the old News of the World tournament, which was always best of 3 legs, first to 2, is something that could also be incorporated into the modern game and sort of link back to the history of the sport. But the big one that really everyone wants to see is a sort of Royal Rumble of darts. Royal Rumble is a wrestling event, WWE event, where 2 wrestlers come together into the ring, and the winner stays on, and then it's all about surprise and crowd interaction, because you don't know who the next person is walking out. For this to work in darts, I think you'd have to have a rough idea. So when you're marketing in this event, so the PDC, no, all the Premier League stars, they will be there. These sort of 15 players, they will be there. But we're not going to tell you who the other 15 players are. But we will say they're like 3 Development Tour players, 3 Challenge Tour players, 3 Women's Series players, some WDF players we see regularly at Modus. Think of even legends of the sport. So when this idea gets thrown around, it's always about Phil Taylor, and for very good reason. But what if you threw in guys like Paul Lim, Steve Beaton, Wayne Mardle, John Part, those types of players who are famous in darts, in the darts world, but is not really well known to a generation that has only just come about watching the sport because of the Luke Littler effect. So this is an idea that would be great. And you can even merge some of these ideas. Why not play a 1001 one-leg shootout as part of the Royal Rumble format, or a best of 3-leg, first to 2-leg affair? These are the sorts of ideas that I think would add something. We're seeing a lot of sports. It started with the T20 effect, which I made a video on very early on in this channel's history, which you can go check out, about how T20 cricket really amplified the road we've been on in the last 20 years of shorter attention spans, that sort of thing. But it's something a lot of sports have looked into as a result of the success of T20 cricket, and I think darts is missing out. Now, this brings me back to the calendar point. We've got to be real conscientious about how we do this. Do we replace events? Do we tweak things around a little bit with the way things are organised? That is going to be a big, important debate in the future if we want to do these things. There's a lot of fun ideas here, but unfortunately, there's only 365 days in a year, 366 if it's a leap year, so there isn't that much time to work with, and the calendar's already pretty full at the moment. Even more so if you're saying, right, we're not going to do anything in January, as I've already mentioned. To wrap up the video, I do want to talk about the qualification format for some of the events we already have, starting with the World Series of Darts. This is obviously a great idea to expand the knowledge and the growth of the sport, but I reckon it can be improved. It's quite samey with many of the players we see year upon year, or even just within the year, of players who are going there. That's because I don't think there's enough spot for PDC superstars. So here is my suggestion. There's variations on this, but what I reckon should happen is you want your Premier League, you want your big name players there. So I reckon the 8 of the Premier League, or whatever the Premier League format is, if it changes in the future, if it expands, then we can keep this idea going. But given we've got 8 in the Premier League now, we'll say, all right, we'll keep our 8 Premier League players, and unless any of them withdraws, they'll get in. Then we'll go with the next 8 best in the world, but we'll sort of do it over blocks. So here's how I would schedule the World Series of Darts at the moment. I would have, I would not have any events in January, as already mentioned. I would look at events. Obviously, we've got one in the US Madison Square Garden. It's probably the biggest now of the World Series Tour events. I'd like to see one in Canada with the growth of the CDC. I think a US Canada event or double would work quite well, as we already see with Australia and New Zealand. I would like to see going down into South America, so probably Brazil, and also across to Africa with South Africa. We've already held events there in the past. Mervyn King hit a 9-darter there, the first televised one outside of Europe. Of course, it was hit against James Wade. I'd grab those 4 events together and basically play them in 4 consecutive weekend blocks. I'd do a similar thing after the World Match Play. So this would be, that first block would be between the Premier League and the World Match Play, even before the World Cup of Darts. And then after the World Match Play, those next 4, I would like to see Australia, New Zealand, as we already have. I'm not a big fan of Bahrain. I'm going to do a case for video probably next month, I reckon, on sports washing and the problematic and the problems regarding to sports washing. So perhaps a place like Singapore would be good. And the question is, do you still even want a European World Series event? I reckon the current European World Series events would probably be better suited as Euro Tour events. But maybe there's something else in there. There's a bit of room for expand. But I want to see 2 blocks of 4 World Series events. And you would take, in addition to the 8 Premier League players, the 16 best players in the world. You would split them into 2, so 8 would go to, for example, US and Canada, and the next 8 would go to what I would say is the South American event and the African event, so probably Brazil and South Africa. The format would be simple. You would take the top 8 in the world, and you would see them automatically into a second round, which would be happening on a Saturday. The tournament would start on a Friday with the 8 other PDC superstars. So it doesn't necessarily need to be the Premier League players. If there is a non-Premier League player who is higher ranked than a Premier League player, then put them through to that second round. You could also do this of the World Series Order of Merit, to be fair. But let's just go with the 2 Order of Merit as we keep using. So you'd have, on the Friday, 8 top name players, but perhaps not quite the Littlers and the Humphreys. They'll be coming in on day 2. And then we play them against the 8 regional qualifiers, the 8 challengers, if you will. And this is great for them because the competition now is a little bit lower. It will still be very difficult. It would still be more likely than not that the PC superstars would win. But now, if you're not playing, for example, Luke Littler in the first round, you're playing someone like, let me pick a name out of here, randomly. Who's someone in the top 16? I don't know, Johnny Clayton or Damon Hatter. These are very good quality players. But maybe there might be a little bit more of a good chance against someone like them. And then on Saturday night, you'd have another session of 8 matches where you would now play those seeded players, and then the Sunday to conclude the tournament. I'd schedule all these events like this. You'd get a bit more variety as well with the different names that would play there, and you would also hopefully be able to better construct a top 32 World Series Order of Merit for the World Series Finals, which I'm tentatively supporting. I did enjoy the event last year in Amsterdam. I'm keeping that one around, though. It has been suggested to boot that off for a slightly different, for example, a Royal Rumble, or using a format that I mentioned previously. Something else that really needs fixing is the Grand Slam of Darts. We know that this year it's going to be 32. It's basically the same qualification format. But next year, for 2026, they're going to 48 players, and this is much needed. I've got all sorts of ideas for different champions of different competitions that you could throw in here. I'm thinking the 3 lots of Motor Super Series series winners we get through here. I'm thinking the World Seniors Darts Tour and their World Champion. I'm thinking the Darts Players Australia, Darts Players New Zealand. Lakeside, WGF. Why not invite their Lakeside World Champion men's and women's to come along in here? I think this one needs a bit more tweaking. I would the one thing I would do is get rid of that qualifier for tour card holders. Tour card holders have enough chances, and it's one less event in the year that we are cramming in there. So for the Grand Slam of Darts, I would just keep it to the winners, potentially for the major events, maybe the runner-ups for the majors, to be fair, and get at least 24 players in there. My initial thinking was actually to go to 40 and have 24 players from the PDC, and then sort of 16 different players from non-PDC events. Well, I say non-PDC events. The Challenge Tour winner, the Development Tour winner, would get a spot, but not tour card holders. 16 non-tour card holders. With the announcement that it's going to 48, you need even more places. So I probably expect them to keep that qualify now, just to make sure they can get themselves to 48 and add 8 more places, which was my original thinking, but with the removal of the qualifier. So the Grand Slam of Darts is a bit more of a confusing tournament. I would do it as if you win or you're runner-up at a major, you would get in. If that's not enough spaces, we'd go to the European Tour, and then the Players Championship, then the World Series, and if we're somehow still not done, which won't be the case, we probably won't even need to go to the World Series. But if we do, and we're still not enough, just go to the 2-year Order of Merit. And then, in addition to the events we already have now, look at things like the World Seniors, the WDF, the Motor Super Series, and organisations like that, Darts Players Australia, Darts Players New Zealand, those sorts of tours and organisations, maybe get qualifiers from Africa and South America, Latin America, who could join in potentially to that event in Wolverhampton. And the last one is indeed the World Championship. I'll briefly talk about this one. We know it's going to 1-8. It does look like it's just going to be a straight 1-8, very much like the tennis Grand Slams. Thank goodness for that. They haven't stacked them to the top 16, top 32 even more than they currently do. So that is a good surprise. But what we haven't seen yet is the qualification format, despite the fact we're in mid-May as I record this. So what I think the best path format, and who knows what they're going to do, but the best way forward for mine is to keep basically what we have now. Top 32 in the world on the 2-year Order of Merit, plus the top 32 in the world on the 1-year Order of Merit, the Pro Tour Order of Merit, the 4-place qualifier, as we already have. I'd keep that one. But then mostly looking to give those additional spots to non-tour card holders. I really wouldn't expand it anymore. It's currently 66 tour card holders got into the last World Championship. Now, yes, they got expanded to 68 because a couple of players didn't take their spot. I would leave it at 32-32. I'd give 4 spots always, every year, for that qualifier, not 2 plus, maybe if someone drops off, we need to add another one. If a player refuses, well, for the most part, I would actually allow a non-tour card holders to play the WF and the PDC. But the PDC really want to stick firm and say, no, you've got to play one or the other. And if a player refuses their invite, I would just go off the Order of Merit of those who haven't qualified, but using the qualifier as an example. So the highest ranked player who lost in the final round of that tour card holder qualifier would get in instead, which is the reserve list, which is always available in case a player drops out after the field has been nominally completed. Well, that's just about all I have. I rambled there. I didn't have much of a script. I sort of had ideas of what I want. Hopefully that followed all right, and you were able to keep track with all my musings. If there are any questions, which there probably are after that, feel free to drop a comment, and I will be able to answer them to the best of my ability. There is plenty of ideas, so if there's something that I've neglected to mention that you feel is important, feel free to drop it in the comment section below. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Subscribe to the Extra Time channel if you haven't already. Make sure to check out the 9 Dart podcast as well. It's only available at the moment on the Extra Time YouTube channel, though hopefully within the next month I will be able to sort out the RSS feed, which will mean you'll be able to listen to it on non-YouTube podcast platforms. So stick around for that. Make sure to follow the 9 Dart podcast as well on Instagram, and follow me across all social media channels that I'm on. I'm actually going to do an update hopefully soon on listing my all my social media accounts, given I've got one at the top pinned on both my Twitter and Instagram, but I'm looking at adding a few others formally. So make sure to keep an eye on that. Thank you very much for watching. In my next video, I will discuss the career of the great Australian tennis player Rod Laver, but until then, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you soon. Thank you very much, Internet.